This was my coolest Facebook Marketplace find. Welcome back, troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Alright, so Facebook Marketplace, if you're not familiar, it's like an online garage sale. Sometimes people will send me listings of cool guitars that show up in their area, and 9 times out of 10, the guy's not gonna ship anyways. It's just fun to see what guitars are out there. But this thing was special enough to make the shipping process happen. Because inside here, my friends, is a piece of early 2000s Gibson history. This is none other than the Angus Young SG very first signature run guitar prototype. And it's in immaculate condition. So I had to pick this up, even though I've already reviewed and documented this model, simply because it's so different from the stock ones. They changed a lot of things about these. So we need to take a look at this today. So you can check out this video right here if you need to learn about all the Angus Young signature SGs that they've ever done. But today we're just going to focus on the very first production run of an Angus signature. They were Gibson USA produced from around the year 2000 until 2009. They had some slight spec changes in between, but it was a pretty long run of guitars. It was a 68 style SG with the cool bat wing pickguard, and it had a vibrola on it. Red Angus. It had the cool lyre etching, as well as some nice thunderbolts. And then the other signature thing for early 2000s guitars, like the Slash models, got his cool Scully artwork. This one had the Angus Devil Child going on. And even though that was a pretty long production run, these SGs have held value exponentially well. So now let's learn about what makes this prototype so special. The very first thing that caught my attention is look at our lyre vibrola. This was initially meant to be an AC/DC signature guitar, not necessarily just Angus. But somewhere along the prototyping stage, they decided to switch that just to his name. It looks like they got the lyre vibrola pretty much right from the get-go, but having AC/DC on this one is very cool. You're tying in the band and Angus, because that is the next thing that's special on this one. Take a look at our headstock. That's not the same Devil Child that was used in production. That's one that's trying to step on ya. He's a little bit too rock and roll for Gibson smoking something. And overall is just a little bit more sinister looking than the production ones. I understand why they went with the other one, because this one's maybe just a little bit too small. It doesn't stand out. And honestly, the printing quality of it wasn't necessarily that good. It definitely looks a little bit more sketched out rather than the one that we're used to seeing. But I love collecting prototypes, but I really love collecting prototypes that have something different than the production run, because that likely means Angus had this in his hands at one point in time, was playing it a little bit and said, nah, let's change this, this, and this. Unfortunately, this is not actually marked a prototype, so how do we know it even is a prototype? We have a true Gibson certificate of authenticity for this model. Basically says what all the COAs say currently, but it is labeled right here as a signature SG prototype for Angus Young. You've got the general manager's signature, it looks like Jeff Allen, and the serial number that is printed on, and it is an exact match. Well, this model was first released in July of the year 2000. The serial number on this one dates it to February of 2000. So yeah, the first production runs were likely produced before they announced them, but not quite that far in advance. We also have the original email correspondences here of the guy that I got this from with Gibson on how he acquired it. This has a bunch of personal information, so I'm sorry I have to blur it out. But reading through these emails, apparently the guy I bought it from was Angus Young's main point of contact through Gibson while they were designing this, which is strange because he did not introduce himself that way. But the name is an exact match. And this email is basically asking Jeff Allen, the manager at the time, if he could keep this Angus Young prototype that was sitting here in the office. And apparently Angus was asking for some models that he could have for use out on tour. So he was trying to verify with the manager, is that part of his contract? Is it not? So then Jeff responds saying Kevin will take care of those guitars, getting them sent to Angus. And then the previous owner of this guitar then gets approval that he can have this prototype. So I take that as maybe this was a pretty early prototype, and there might be a prototype or two after this. I mean, there's usually a handful of them. So this one was just left at the office, no longer needed because it wasn't the selected one. The next thing I have here is actually pretty cool. This is a real copy of Angus's original artist agreement endorsement that he had to sign and date. Now, this isn't actually one that was signed and dated. Now, that would be really cool, but having a copy of this in general is just nice. I guess to be fair, this is technically an amendment to their first agreement, which apparently first took place on March 1st of 1999. But you can pause the video and read this. If a COA and artist agreement wasn't cool enough for you, how about this? The original traveling sheet of how they were speccing this thing out. This is like what Fender has with all their guitars. Gibson also has it. They just don't send it to the customer. So you can see it's some sort of a special request. They're still in prototype stage. It says, do not use this for a big production run. They still don't know exactly what they're doing. And then this sheet appears to be some sort of a printout on whatever they fed into the machine to engrave the vibrola tailpiece, or whatever they sent to the company that produces them for Gibson. Next, we get some other cool case candy, like the original marketing pamphlet for these Angus Young SGs. Obviously, it's not this one in the photo because so many things were different, but man, I miss advertisements like these. I know Gibson doesn't have to do it anymore because we've got the internet and everything, but these are so cool to have and collect. So I'll put some scans of this here on the screen so you can pause and take a look at it if you need to. We've also got one here for the Nicky 6 Blackbird, the Gary Moore Signature Les Paul Standard, as well as this one again. And I wish I could say this was Angus actually playing this guitar and it's like an old Polaroid strip or something, but this appears to be him playing a different guitar. I'm not sure what this is exactly all about, but it's really cool to see. So naturally, all this in unplayed condition, that's good enough for me. Looks like they got the case right just from the beginning. And they do have the correct child right here. Like, I was really curious if this case shroud was going to be the same as this on the prototype. So maybe they decided just to simplify things and be like, okay, let's just use the same one on each. That way we're not causing confusion. Or it could be that the case actually came after, once they finalized everything, and they were just sending it in a regular SG case when it was going back and forth to Angus, or maybe he came to the factory to check them out. It's impossible to know. Maybe he can chime in. Needless to say, this is a really cool guitar. I just want to re-emphasize here, this is one of the first prototypes of any signature Angus Young SG. The guy many people most heavily associates with SGs. Sure, they had cooler runs later on down the road, like the custom shop models, and there are artist proofs and prototypes of those out there. But this one, if it wasn't for this run of guitars, those ones might not exist. So having this in my collection actually makes me pretty happy. So let's go ahead and throw this on the workbench to take a look at its parts and specs. Some guys might question, why would you take apart a prototype? It's because you find some crazy stuff. So let's take a look at our pickup cavities first. Inside here we have the markings AC/DC. Wonder why? Because it's the AC/DC SG officially. But I was hoping it would say to Angus or something. But no, it just says SGS. So maybe SG standard. I'm not entirely too sure. You can see the neck tenon where it joins to the body right here. And what you're seeing right there is the maple cap over top of the truss rod channel route. Now let's talk about our pickups over here. So the stock standard production one had a 57 Classic in the neck, and the bridge pickup was an Angus Young Signature. And this is why I'm happy I took this apart to see what was in this prototype, because we do not have the Angus Young Signature pickup yet, because this just looks like two 57 Classics to me. It's either that or they just changed the way that the Angus Young Signature looked, because that one just had the usual Gibson base plate instead of the patent applied for decal. So yeah, I'm sorry, we still don't have a video of mine that documents the configuration that's proper, because the last one I had a factory error where the Angus Young Signature pickup that was hotter was in the neck, and then the 57 was over here, and then this one just has two 57s. But okay, I think we have our answer here. Maybe that is just a prototype pickup that looks different, because that is way too hot for a 57 Classic at 10.6k ohms. And then the neck is also a 10.6, so these might just be complete prototype pickups in and of themselves. See, this is why you check stuff, especially on prototypes that have other things that are non-standard. The bridge is a full ABR1 with wire retainer, labeled as such. And that's a true ABR1 with a post drilled directly into the body. As far as our controls, 3-way toggle, 2 volumes, 2 tones, output jack on the front. As far as our vibrola unit, there's not too much different. If you've never seen one of these before, basically this hunk of metal slides onto that bar right here. Then all you're doing with this big walrus tooth here is bending the metal, because the ball end of the strings go in right here, and it just creates a light warble effect. Not the best for tuning stability, but as long as you're gentle with it, sometimes if it's set up really good, it'll work. But this plate over here, that's special on this one, again, because it reads AC/DC instead of Angus, it just secures to the side using 4 tiny little screws, which you can see right there. And the unit itself secures to the top using 6 screws, 4 tiny ones, 2 big ones. But I will say the finish is ultra thin on this one. You can definitely see the mahogany wood grain through this finish. But looking at some of the production ones, I think that was just a spec for these. That maybe he wanted a really thin finish to kind of get it closer to the vintage style that he's used to playing on his older ones. But now let's talk about our fretboard here. This was so dried out when I got it. It wouldn't surprise me had it had never been conditioned since it was built in the year 2000. You've got a beautiful Indian rosewood fretboard here, with just your standard acrylic trapezoid inlays. It's your standard 24 3/4 inch scale length with a 12-inch fretboard radius. But now I'm curious, is the neck profile different if our pickups and other things, because this was a custom Angus signature neck profile for this particular guitar. So our nut width is 1.7 inches. 2.08 by the 12th. First fret neck depth, 0.86. And that increases to 0.99 by the 12th. So yeah, surprisingly different. They hadn't nailed that down yet. Here's that neck profile at the first fret and the 12th fret. It's definitely a rounded C shape, but it feels a little bit flat on the back of the neck. But definitely chunkier than like a 61 style SG neck. Now the face of our headstock, look at this. You can just tell this is a prototype by how janky it looks. You can see where they hand cut this decal out, just right around there. They got a little bit lazy right here. And this line probably didn't show brand new, but as the decals kind of shrunk a little bit, the line definitely started to appear. They cut it out a little bit better on this side. There's just something so primitive looking about this one as compared to what they did. But I'm curious if it was Gibson who said no, or if Angus just decided, nah, let's use the more simple design. Maybe if this video reaches him, he can make his own video response and tell us about it. But other than that, you just have your Gibson logo here. We can see our truss rod, everything's looking good. You can also see that maple block we were talking about earlier. You don't always see that in that location. Usually it's covered over in paint. On top of the fretboard not being conditioned, I don't think this thing was ever set up in the past 20 years either. There was a lot of relief in the neck that I straightened out and lowered the action, so now it's good to play. But let's check out the backside now. You've got some beautiful wood grain back here when you can see through all the reflections, but it's just your regular SG carves here. You've got a strap button in your heel as well as the bottom end. Doesn't look like they changed anything around in here for the most part. You just have the Gibson branded pots, and we do have green capacitors in here. That's different from last time. But there is something interesting in here. At first, I couldn't tell what that was. It's just like some black markers. Is that someone's name? No, it just says AC/DC again. Yeah, that's cool. It's always great to see markings like that when your headstock isn't stamped prototype. Now, condition-wise, you got a small scuff or something over here, and you've got some polishing swirls and whatnot back here, but this really is a super thin finish. I want to drive that point home, especially on the neck. You can really feel the wood grain. It's kind of interesting. But there's definitely some light scratching to the back of the neck. Following up the backside of the headstock, we get to our serial number, 00710654, made in USA, with our Gibson Clusen Deluxe style tuners. All said and done, this one is 7 pounds, 2.3 ounces. Let's go ahead and hear how this prototype sounds. distorted tones, they definitely pull off AC/DC licks. I find the neck pickup is a little bit muddy. But it's very full sounding at the same time. It's kind of hard to describe. Go ahead and try some clean tones. Now that we know all about the Angus Young Signature Prototype SG, what are my final thoughts on this? I'm very happy I got the chance to document this unique beast. Always love prototypes when they have something different. They weren't completely finalized, because most prototypes you find on the market, it's like, okay, it's the one before, they made everything official, there's nothing that special. Now what's the fate of this one? I like it. I'm perfectly happy keeping this, but if you want to offer me a crazy amount of money for this, and I can go buy something else Norland era that somebody wants crazy money for, we'll do a crazy money swap. So troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed documenting this with me, and thank you for taking a part in its journey today. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, you probably like signature guitars. How about you check out this one? The Red Rocker Les Paul?